Now, research from a clinic in Southampton says there's a sharp rise in the number of people using illicitly obtained cannabis to manage health conditions. Currently, cannabis-based medicines are not available through GPs and only prescribed by specialist hospital doctors. Here's Amanda from Hampshire and her story.
I specifically needed to source cannabis illegally because I had breast cancer. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2012. And going through a bilateral mastectomy, I was also having such pain, massive pain, dealing with nausea, chemotherapy, just getting sick altogether. We couldn't keep food down. So in order to help me go through this process, because it wasn't just the radiation, but again, like I was saying, it's the chemo, it basically ruins all your nerves. And then once I had my bilateral mastectomy, the pain after that was just debilitating for myself. So I had no choice but to actually go out and start researching and sourcing something that I knew was best for me. Now, when I tried, I don't really like taking pills too much. And once you take so many painkillers, then you've got to take other substances in order to protect your stomach lining. So I'm putting more chemicals inside of my body, of which sourcing illegal cannabis at that point in time was my only way to go because it eliminated the pain within minutes. So it was a benefit for myself.
Joining me now is the doctor behind the research, Dr. Simon Erridge from Sapphire Medical Clinics. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, Alan.
This is a complicated, well, it feels to me complicated because of the amount of people who will be leaning into the radio and the diverse reaction that we have to drugs that are illegal. But a good point was made by Amanda that this is organic, it's a plant, and perhaps we look at it incorrectly. So your take on her story and perhaps what needs to happen.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on to talk about this, because I think it is a complex issue. And what we understand is that now in the UK we have medical cannabis that is accessible through specialist clinics like Sapphire and other ones across the UK. But a number of people are still continuing to go down illicit routes. And that is largely, we think, due to, one, a lack of education. 25% of those people we surveyed who were using illicit cannabis for health reasons actually weren't even aware that medical cannabis was available in the UK. And then beyond that, there's a need for sort of further research so that we can help push forward accessibility through the NHS where appropriate as well.
How, forgive me for this sort of rather, I'm sure it's very obvious in your mind, but medical cannabis and illegally sourced cannabis, how do they differ?
Yeah, so the key aspect is for medical cannabis is that they're produced to a pharmaceutical standard that you would expect of any medicine. You know, think of paracetamol, aspirin. You know, there are strict guidelines which govern how medical cannabis can be produced, and that is to ensure its safety so that it's not contaminated by any bacteria or mold that may potentially cause harmful side effects, but also in the illicit market and in unregulated markets in other countries, we know that you can get contamination with other chemicals that aren't intended for medicinal purposes. And again, that just increases the risk, the health risk to the individual who's accessing it.
Does it show itself in clinical trials to be better at helping people manage pain?
So when we look at the clinical trials for pain, it's important to recognise that medical cannabis is not a panacea. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to help everybody. But there was a really interesting study in the British Medical Journal last year, which suggested that for those people who have failed to gain sufficient benefit from conventional therapies, it would be worth giving a trial of medicinal cannabis product because of the potential associated benefit that they may receive with both their pain, but then also in other outcomes such as sleep and their general health-related quality of life.
With Amanda's story, she was in chronic pain, double mastectomy, a terrible story, and cannabis was essentially something that saved her. I think she would say it saved her and gave her a bit of a breakthrough. If someone's listening to this today and they have a medical issue, can they then go to their GP and say, I heard this on the radio, I'd much rather give this a go than all the pills I'm currently taking?
Yeah, so there's two options really at the moment. One is certainly to go and approach your GP, and I would always encourage people to discuss the potential options available to them with either their GP or a specialist. Or if you're listening and you think that this is something that's of interest to you, you can actually self-refer to Sapphire clinics and other clinics around the UK. And actually, at sapphireclinics.com, we have some patient information education, so you can find out what is medical cannabis, what does it entail, what conditions can it be prescribed for, and even a free eligibility checker, because to be prescribed medical cannabis, you need to meet certain criteria that you've tried first-line licensed therapies for your condition. So for chronic pain, that might be some of the medications that Amanda was talking about that she previously had taken. And if you insert that into the free eligibility checker, you can kind of get a rough estimate as to whether you would be eligible for medical cannabis in the UK.
Fascinating. Thank you for your time this morning, Dr. Simon Erridge there, Head of Research at Sapphire Medical Clinics. It's 8:31.